Okay, this is the video where we talk about assembling the body on the Smith Subaru Ute. So let's review where we are and go through some of the key things you have to know about the bed design and the bed assembly before we do the body. So let's review. If you remember, we put in the side B-pillar braces here with only a couple of rivets. You put one at the bottom, you put one in the middle, you keep it a little bit flexible before the final mounting, and then you install the front wall with the two bolts on the bottom. That front wall, you want to clamp to the B-pillar brace. So at this point, you've got the front wall installed, you've got the B-pillar brace installed, and you've connected these two together on each side so that you have this not moving. Once these three pieces are installed, you're going to run silicone over that seam at the bottom of this front wall. Because remember, when you have the front tray installed, when you have all this in there, even though you can reach under there, it's pretty hard to put silicone along that seam. So that then is going to be sealed to the water, to the outside world, because of the silicone at the bottom of this sheet, or the bottom of this front wall, and the fact that they're all held together and not moving by being attached to the front B-pillar braces. So that's the first stage of a bed assembly. The next stage is you're going to assemble the front tray to the holes that are pre-pierced on the front of the front wall, and you're going to install those 4 or 5 bolts at the bottom and install this tray, and you're even going to install the brace that mounts this tray to the floor. That keeps the front wall from moving. Then you unclamp the front wall from the sides, because the bed sides have to slide between these two layers. Then you're going to take each bed side individually after attaching this rear tray tight. The reason you want to attach the rear tray tight is that it's very hard to reach these bolts underneath, if not impossible. So tighten up this tray bolted to each side, left and right. Then take a buddy. You can do it alone, but it's really a pain. You're going to lift up the 3 pieces, right? The bed side, the rear tray, the other bed side, and you're going to wiggle them forward in between the B-pillar and the wall. There's a gap right there. You'll see it. And you're going to wiggle and slide this piece, kind of come at from the top. You're going to wiggle it in, and you're going to drop it down along this flange. So if you come over here, this is one that's already assembled, so it's great to see. The aluminum goes on the inside edge of the flange. So this flange right here, this aluminum wall is on the inside. And the one thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a 46-inch piece of 2x4 and put it at this back edge. And what we do is we just use a piece of strapping across the top, and then we nail a piece of 2x4 to it so we can set it on top. But just use a piece of wood to hold this square while you're assembling the bed. Then you're going to assemble the rear tailgate, not in a final configuration. You're just going to slide the tailgate into these hardware, into its latches, and this is the tailgate without the fiberglass cover. You're just going to assemble it, and you're going to check the rear edge. When you look forward on this edge here, you're going to make sure that this gap is square in a vertical direction. So that's our review. We don't do the inner fender positioning until we know the bed is square. Once this bed is square, go ahead and put your inner fenders in for visual positioning. Don't tighten anything yet. And begin the process of riveting and bolting your side bed aluminum pieces together. And when you rivet on these aluminum bed sides to the seam on the car, it's kind of like a cylinder head on a car motor. If you just start riveting front to back, it's probably going to twist and deform as you tighten. It might not, you might get lucky, but in general, you want to mount a rivet up here, one back here, one in the middle. If you're using bolts on the seam, you're going to want to drill a hole, lightly tighten this one, spread the load while your wood brace is positioned in the rear. Every now and then, go back to the wood brace and lift it up and make sure that it's not really tightening. You don't want to, if there's a lot of pressure on that wood piece, the minute you take it out, it's going to spring in, right? You don't want that. So every now and then, while you're tightening the bed sides, if you put a few rivets in, as you're going along over an hour, come back and grab your wood piece and just lift it out and see if it's under tension or not. This method really works well because at the end of it and at the start of this body video, You're going to have bed sides that are square. You're not going to have any tension holding the tops wanting to come in. You're going to have the inner fenders positioned in place to make sure this inside seam looks pretty good. And you're going to begin test fitting the body, which is what we're going to do next. One of the keys to getting the bed rear corner latch and hinge aligned is this joint right here. So there's a plate underneath this joint. So if you just left it, it would be flexible. We join this to this with these 4 holes and a backing plate that goes underneath. So you find the right distance, you put your tailgate on, you align all your panels, and at the very end, you're going to move this in and out to get your latch striker mounted, and this surface right here mounted to the correct distance in and out. Once you get it the right distance, go ahead, drill your holes, install your backing plate, and that fixes the rear latch at the correct in and out distance so that your gaps line up perfect. So brace plate underneath these 2 at the very end, after your body is all set up, then install that brace plate. So these, even though these are being test fit, I use flush rivets for these instead of the button rivets like on the race car here. Go ahead and use your flush rivets, 1, 2, 3, and then you won't see anything, standing up when you go to put your aluminum in place. The other thing you want to do is when you position this rear inner fender, see how we drew, take a look inside there, we drew a line. Before installing the aluminum, we drew this line, that red line. We drew that line, and then we pulled the fender off, drilled the holes for the rivets, and then we could rivet from the other side knowing we were going to hit this piece. One of the things that differentiates the Subaru kit from our other Smith kits is this outer door area brace. So this huge brace is installed because a lot of Subarus are rusty and need a little bit of extra support. So you mount this in the forward hinge points of the rear door, of the old rear door. And you can see this is CNC cut to clear any bumps or anything that you'll see when you install this. The key, and I've said this before, when you go to tighten these bolts that mount this plate onto the side of the bed, make sure you start with everything loose and tighten the outer ones first so that you don't warp the side of the bed. This is such a strong brace that if you just go ahead and tighten everything, it could actually change the shape of the bed and pull it in too far or pull it out too far. Get your bed square first, gently tighten all the bolts, make sure your bed is still square, and then use, and you can see here, we actually use a spacer so as to not tighten this down and pull these 2 together. So if you need, we give you plenty of spacer material in the kit. If you need it, go ahead and use it. This one, you can just cut a little 1x1 spacer or even use a washer between the bolt and the brace itself. On this particular car, it's a rallycross car, so we've filled in the spare tire well, but you're going to use your spare tire well. This is the aluminum bar that you put across where this notch is, and you can see this notch matches, and you go all the way up to the top. This wood spacer goes inside of the C-channel, and then when you pull that to the right height, you use these L brackets to mount the C-channel to the floor at the right height. And so you put a bolt through. We have the long, 2-inch bolts that go through each of the C-channels, and these are extra long for this particular car. But basically, you're going to lift that flush, and you're going to put a bolt through those 2, and then just rivet this to the floor. Make sure you put bonding, silicone or something under the rivets here so that it doesn't rust over time. But that's each left and right side. There's your support bar. Once your support bar is in place, you can then mount your extruded bed floor. And once again, place the bed floor in ahead of time. I place all 3 in place. And basically, you're going to be taking at the leading edge where there is just a tray. You're going to use these riv nuts, and once again you rivet these into place after drilling the hole, and the little 1/4 20 screws basically bolt into that riv nut to mount the leading edge. With the middle bars, I'll show you. So you're going to use riv nuts in the rear. So as you drill your holes to mount this bed floor to the aluminum, you're going to use the riv nuts. And in the really thick aluminum, since that's going to be flush to the surface, you're going to actually drill and tap your 1/4 20 threads in this very thick aluminum, so this can be directly bolted down to the floor here. Okay, this is your front tray of the bed, and this is the rear of this tray. This is the support that goes down to the floor. Use the old seatbelt bolts, and they bolt this tray right to the old holes where the center two seat belts used to be mounted. These three you can pre-assemble onto the tray if you want to. It's a little tricky to reach under here and do the nuts, but it's doable. So the leading edge of the bed sides, once you have your bedside mounted, we use these flush stainless bolts that go through the front wall flange. Now you can tell we don't make them completely flush. You have to get them within a 1/16 of an inch of flush, but these 4 bolts, you're going to drill those through. Remember, after you have everything positioned, install these 4, and that'll help keep this entire side much more true. You don't want to tighten any of these bolts until you know your bed is square and true with the body installed. Then you quick take the body off, tighten all these down, double check one more time with your inner fender installed to make sure that everything is still square. When you're installing your rear window surround, this is your structural member underneath. These are your plates that mount the front to the back, the extra support plates. Right here, this edge is the edge that the fiberglass actually rests on. So you saw it assembled. This seam right here, you're going to keep this rubber gasket. And then you're going to either put a flush rivet through this little plate here. You're going to drill through the fiberglass here and up here, right under this plate here, probably right about there. And you're going to drill those 2 holes, and that will mount the rear surround to the body of the car. Remember, along the bottom of the rear surround, you're going to have holes drilled on this surface to hold that solid, and you're going to have this up here bonded and riveted in place. So the top and bottom are very solid. This leading flap, if you will, this leading little ear that comes forward, you're going to want to put 2 little rivets, top and bottom, and then you're done. Okay, the rear surround is one of the things that you'll get the most nervous about, and there's really no reason to. You're going to trim your piece very much like this. This is even though this is painted, I want to show you, the shapes are. This is the forward ear. You're going to put this leading edge right against this leading edge of the rubber gasket. You're going to put the leading ear under your trim. See this trim piece here? It's going to slide underneath. So this right here slides in. And I don't have the body quarters installed, but I can show you this gap here. If it's too tight, go ahead and open that up with a little screwdriver. Make sure you're giving yourself enough room. I'll pull this out of the way so you can see. This top flange here slides under the steel of the stock Subaru. And this entire piece, you kind of have to wiggle it. See how this slides underneath, slides up there? This whole thing hammers in. And you can see where the leading edge is. I'm going to keep going, and then I do the same thing on the other side. What I wanted to tell you was that a lot of people, me included, I'm going to actually sand down the surface of this flange and this flange right here, get it down to raw fiberglass from the gap here forward, and then I'm going to go under this surface. If you can film underneath, this is the surface where you're going to be bonding. My underneath, this right under here, you want to grind this down to bare metal, what my index finger is touching. The underneath side of this, if you're going to use panel bond, has to be down to bare metal. So you basically take a sanding disc upside down on your grinder, or face up with it. But you're going to want to remove some of this metal under here if you're going to use panel bond. Panel bond will stick to the raw fiberglass and raw metal. It doesn't do well with paint to paint. It does much better with raw metal to fiberglass. And then you can get rid of using all the rivets that we had installed on this car. So I think my favorite way to do it is panel bond all the way here. Reach under there with a wire brush or sandpaper on a paint stick. Sand as much as you can. Load up the panel bond on your flanges here. Put a good 1/4 inch bead of panel bond on the leading edge. Put a little 1/4 inch bead of panel bond inside here after giving yourself a metal to metal bond. And then as you slide your rear surround in, go ahead and use a rivet on the outside of each corner, maybe one in the middle, a flush rivet. And that really reduces the amount of body work you have to do to clean this up. If you're really careful cutting and you use panel bond, there is the option of just using panel bond and no rivets. the panel bond by 3M is strong enough to really adhere the rear surround to the front of the car. Then you're only doing body work on the rear surround itself. I still think the best looking cars do not have a seam here, but panel bond does give you the option, if you're careful enough with this front seam, of not, painting the whole front half of the car. This trim piece right here has a little clip under here that presses down. You are going to have to adhere, once this whole thing is assembled, you are going to want to put a little flush rivet or something here to hold this trim down. I put one out here, and I actually attach it into the groove that is in the mold on the rear surround. So I'll put one right through about a ½ inch from the edge. I'll put a little flush rivet down there, put a little bit of Bondo work on there, paint this black, and it looks really nice and clean. I also fill the end, either by crimping it down a little with a little Bondo or just putting a little bit of windshield adhesive, the black, to fill that open end when we're doing the final details. Once you have your brace installed, remember to install this brace very lightly at first. This brace is strong enough where it can change the shape of the rear bed. So you want to make sure you're not just cranking down on these bolts and moving the bed. So align your bed first, put this on here. If you have to put little washers on the back side of bolts to make sure you don't pull it over, that's a good idea, but you want to put this in last. You don't want to change the shape of the rear bed. And then when you mount your quarter, you have a little tab here, and this tab can change shape, but in general, it's going to be a tab that mounts on this wall. The front edge of the body mounts right here. The back edge of the body, you're going to flush rivet to this steel that's already on the Subaru. So the next step is to put the body on, drill temporary holes here and here just to line everything up. And then when you really like where you are, go ahead and put a flush rivet or two down here and a flush rivet or two down here, and then you're ready to do your final body work. So the stock gas cap inner surround here we still use. This car's been repaired because it was rusty, but you can see where this whole thing here has 3 bolts underneath. You can loosen up these 3 bolts under the gas cap area here. This whole thing can move. Basically what I do is I remove all this foamy material here, and then I put silicone or another sealing like windshield adhesive or something like that on the surface. And then when I mount the quarter, that very last step after positioning it, this will then bond to the quarter panel. And when you're mounting the quarter panel, just make sure this is evenly spaced all around, or your gas cap won't open and close in the right spot. So you can move this, it moves, it's flexible. Put your bonding agent around here as a very, very last step when you know this is in the right spot and the gas cap lines up. So when you're mounting the side quarter panel, you're going to test fit this whole panel. Yours will be in gel coat. And just make sure, we're going to test fit the taillights and the door gap up front, the area under where the old rear doors were. You're going to test fit to see. I mean, on this car, I had to trim a little bit off the bottom, and I had to move the bottom edge forward about 1/8 of an inch before I drilled these holes. So on this particular car, you'll notice we left off the LED license plate lights because it was a rallycross car. I'm actually going to lower this license plate down about 1/4 of an inch so that we can have enough room to permanently mount these little LEDs above the license plate, rather than using this post as the license plate mount. Remember, if you're never going to change your license plate, go ahead and use these LEDs as your license plate mount. That's fine, but be aware, if you have to remove your license plate, this entire LED light and wire assembly has to come out for you to take off your license plate. So I've been mounting this license plate a little bit lower and installing the LED just above it, even if it means drilling a hole into the plate, right above the top of it, with a notch. So that little notch, you can slide your plate out, but your LED license plate light will still shine, unobstructed. So we're going to talk about test fitting the body panels. Don't be distracted, by the way, about the pre-painted panels we have here. This is a rallycross car. We take it apart all the time, so we use painted panels like most people would use gel-coated panels. You're going to have the black gel-coated panels. And this is what you want. Step 1 is to pre-trim the panels so that they're able to fit. Take a look back here. I do notch out. There's a little square right here where the rear tail light, little tab fits. Take a look right here. In the mold, you're going to see this cutout for where the lights fit. There's a bolt right here, a bolt hole in the mold right here. There's another one right here. Take a look from the top, Tim. This is how I trim this is the inner surface of the mold as you get it. There's this piece here. See how I notch this out? You want to have this fiberglass piece sticking out over this aluminum a little bit. You can shine down and just see. So that edge is in the mold. You want it to stick out just a little bit. That's the pre-fitting on that. On the piece here, I've shown you this before. There's a flange right here. See how this slides in? You're going to match up this curve to this curve. Check out here. There's a little bit of a notch right here. You can see where I just notched it. You do whatever it takes to get the pieces to fit well in a rough way. So once you have this test fit, you're going to put the quarter panel on. Go ahead and drill holes on the top here. This all gets covered by a top plate at the end. So if you're using screws, you can use rivets, whatever you want. You can test fit using this top plate. Take a look at this here. This is how we trim the rear window surround. Come on in from the top. You'll see in the mold all of these lines. This is a flange that fits inside of this area. This is a big gap to clear this right here. And then we have another flange that goes from here all the way left to right. So these flanges are fitting under this metal here and contacting this surface right here is sliding under the metal and above that inner layer of metal. So when you're test fitting, do your rough trimming, just like, I mean, this is a final part that's final trimmed, but it's still not a show car yet. Fit your window. You know, in order to mount the window, you lay this surface flat on the table, mount your window from the other side, from the inside out, glue that in place on a flat surface, and then begin the process. And in this car, you can see, we're going to slide the body all the way in here. We're going to have the quarter panel lightly assembled. We're going to take the tailgate and we're going to slide it into the hardware. We're going to put the other quarter on. All of this should be done pretty loose. And you'll notice, if you come over here, you'll notice that I'm doing this test fit before mounting this brace. So you want to test fit this piece before the inner fenders are installed. These inner fenders, before they're installed. Before you install this piece, just with a straight square bed, you want to assemble your body in an early way just to make sure you like where everything looks and lines up. Okay, the Smith tailgate on the kit is a stock Ford Ranger Splash for the Subaru. This assembly method is exactly the same as on the Audi. This is your stock Ranger Splash tailgate. We're going to convert this outer latch, you know, the pull that opens the rear tailgate. We're going to convert that to a single pull on the inside like this right here. So this is the same exact tailgate. The fiberglass cover that is included with the kit mounts on the top, pulls down. You're going to bond along the bottom edge all the way. You're going to bond along this top edge, and then you're going to paint it just like this, but there's no handle, you'll notice. So the emblems are on here, the handle's here, the detail line is here. The trick to this car is the plate. This is the aluminum plate. This is your top protector plate. And this is that strap that's included in the kit. So this strap underneath this goes under, has a clip on the end that grabs this. This strap goes this way, has a clip on the end, and you'll see it in the little kit that we give you. And then the gate opens and closes, as you can tell, by pulling the strap. So that's open, that's closed, and that's how you assemble the entire Ranger tailgate for use in the Subaru. Remember, your inside pieces here are plastic. There's a plastic cup here. And the sliding cup on this end. This little slider mounts on the hinge. To remove the tailgate, you tilt it down about 45 degrees. You pull up on the sliding end and out to remove. So that's the finished Subaru tailgate. And this is ready for installation. I love the WRX badge back here. I think I'm going to have the Subaru block letters installed on the back. But this is the stock finished Smith tailgate compared to the raw Ford Ranger Splash tailgate you see there. When you have all of your pieces lined up, slid in place, you know, positioned on here, tailgate opening and closing and looking pretty square, Then remove all your pieces and begin bolting and riveting your bedside aluminum pieces. So you've pre-fit the body, you know it's pretty close. You start assembling the aluminum bed. It only takes an hour or two. It's not very time intensive. You're going to bolt things together. You bolt in the back, then bolt in the front, bolt in the middle, spread the loads around, and then just make sure that that wood piece comes in and out very easily to make sure you don't have any pinching or changing of the bed. And then when you go to mount this body for the final time, after all of this is installed, after your inner fenders are riveted and bonded in place, you've got everything in place, square. You can then do your final assembly of the body, which is assembling the left side, the roll pan, and the front surround. And by the way, just use screws. If you like the way it looks in screws, you're pretty much done. All you have to do when you remove that and do the bodywork on the panel is put the screws back in the same spot and you've got one that lines up. So slide the front in, put the quarter panel on, use the roll pan, and be very, very aware of lining up this bed before you do the body. Put the body on, take it off. Put the body on, take it off. And remember, at the very end of the day, even if you made a mistake, you do have this adjustability. If this is not square, if this surface is too far out, that's what this plate is used for. You move this in and out to get it square, drill a hole, use the backing plate to freeze this, and you're set. You'll hear this over and over from me throughout the build video. Do it right the first time, get it square, keep it square, but if something changes, you can still adjust at the end of the kit by moving this in and out to wherever you need to be. So that's it. Enjoy your build and have fun with the body. Don't spend too much on paint jobs. It never pays. They're fiberglass parts. Wait to buff the clear after you paint your base coat, clear coat if you're going that direction. Let the bodywork change, shift, and shrink. Any body guy will tell you, fix the car, paint the car, let it sit a while, then buff it out. Have fun with your Subaru build, and we'll see you soon.